Welcome to SCivCast, a civilization podcast focused on its social media platforms.
Shushu 62.
Pawprint 42.
Angel Ledwich.
Josee Gendron.
RobG.
I go to technology to hide from my real life. For now, anyway. Maybe when my real life doesn't include poopy diapers. We could talk about me coming back to a
Good heavens. CivWorld and poopy diapers. I didn't see that conversation coming. Hope Dan's recording this already.
We're here today to talk about how much CivWorld on Facebook has changed, especially in the last 6 months, because it has changed dramatically in that amount of time. There is still a very, well, I don't know if I'd say healthy, but certainly active community that still surrounds CivWorld and still plays on a daily basis, because we're addicted and obsessed with the game. It's just that kind of game, even though it's broken. I think we all acknowledge that. One of the things that's come up in the community over the last few months especially is what constitutes cheating in the game versus what was an exploit that may have been put in by the programmers intentionally, that certain players have learned how to use to their advantage and may or may not have taught other players how to use, and whether or not it's come down to being a game of skill versus whoever has the deepest pockets and is willing to spend the cash to buy the Civ bucks to buy a server. Nobody outside of this group here even knows that we're working on it. So.
Well, that's not true. I'm sorry, that's not true at all. I've got 3 spies that have been talking to me, and I keep telling them to shut the hell up so I can do my podcast. They're all getting all excited.
Are you sure it's a podcast, Angel?
I've been typing very quietly, though.
Who here thought we'd still be talking about this game 6 months ago?
Honestly, it was looking very grim there for a while. There was a sense of doom over the community that the servers were going to stop working when we hit game number 10,000, which didn't happen. We thought that the game was going to end when the servers unexpectedly went down, about a month ago, because a server out in Maryland somewhere decided to go on Fritz.
I think also just with the community, there was a time where it was very grim. You know, everything was negative, I think. People really didn't see a challenge in playing anymore. Some of them just thought there was no way to win the game because some players were just overwhelmingly knowledgeable, and there was some resentment, in the whole of the community. And I think that's turned around in the last probably 4 months.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the Nazgul leaving was overly dramatic and all the rest of that, but we were losing top players on almost a daily basis, and how long were we going to keep the community going? I really think what turned things around to a large extent is what Rob and John were doing with starting that throwback movement.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rob, tell us how you saved the game.
Yeah. Actually, one thing I would add is that there's been ebbs and flows in the game, not just 6 months ago. I remember shortly after the game when I first met you, Doug, in a game, December of 2011 was painful. The games were painfully low in number, and they were not anywhere near interesting. And then it picked up again in January, February, and then shortly there, and you guys were just discussing where things started to get ugly. So I think there's always been an ebb and a flow, kind of, real world holidays. Not many people are able to play. And I think that also impacts the interest in the game. One other thing I think to note now on this podcast, we are all Americans. But the reality is, I think for a while, the players that have been most helping the game along and keeping it alive have actually been the people around the world who are not Americans who play this game.
Yeah, I think you're right about that too. That would be an interesting number to see what percentage of the game is American-based now versus what it was back in January, because the number of daily players is about the same.
Just to define the throwback game, in some ways, the throwback game is really just for a small segment of players. To me, it's players that remember before a lot of the game, was changed by the developers, before it was abandoned by the developers in all sense of accuracy. And it was really a way of trying to play the game the way it was before CivBucks were added, before Facebook spam, advertising was added, before the tower bonus game, all the little aspects that most players who are joining the game now would never think twice that that was a new feature. And I think for some people, it's more of a chance to play the game the way it used to be. I don't really necessarily think it's a game saver. I think it's more kind of like a little kid who's just trying to play a game he used to play in a totally different way to make it challenging again, and kind of in some ways level the playing field for those who don't have access to tons of CivBucks or tons of spam or time. Well, I would disagree with you there. The one thing that is consistent in either fast-paced games where there's lots of spam and lots of CivBucks used, or in games like the throwback games, is time online is the number one thing that gets rewarded. The team that has the most players online working together going to be the team who's most likely going to win the game.
Right. That's why anybody who underestimates Angel is making a big mistake. 24/7, baby. It's a transition from the, how is the game changed to the question of cheating. Spam is an interesting fulcrum to run the conversation on, because that's clearly not cheating. The game was clearly set up, altered to support spam, but this was a game change that was not well thought out by the developers. So I have 4 months worth of spam. And like the last game we played, I promised the person who hosted the game before I joined it, I wouldn't bring that spam out of the closet because it would break his game. Now, of course, my teammates brought it out and we broke the game anyway. But it's cheating, but it's not cheating. It's absolutely legal, but it's game breaking. This whole conversation on cheating crosses all sorts of lines, that there are things that were not intended that are cheating, but really don't hurt the game, and so now they're common practice. Yet there are things that are 100% legal that break the game, so we're not doing that anymore.
There's obviously been, in the last couple months, an influx of a lot of new players. There's definitely servers that are to capacity, which is a good sign. I think it's important as experienced players to point in the direction of where to find information on how to play the game. And I do this in any game that I am in that's not, say, a throwback game or a highly competitive spam and CB game where everyone already knows everybody. I point them in the direction of, say, the tavern, or I point them in the direction of Hints and Tips, Facebook page, or just to all the links that are listed within the forum itself. I used my daughter's account recently to go into the game because I just wanted to see what the tutorial looked like. It had been so long, just to see what is it that the game is trying to teach a player who's learning the game. And it is so counterproductive to how most of us play the game that I think it's really important to either bring a player or two who's willing to talk, which is always the number one most important quality in a new player, is can they talk and listen, and teach them how different the game is actually played versus what the game teaches them in that tutorial.
Yeah, because I think even from very, very early on, I know the first time I went through the tutorial, I'm like, I didn't even catch the fact that you had to join a Civ in order to actually do anything. And so I'm sitting independent and wondering why I'm only up to getting masonry and the game's already in Lake Global.
I think we've all played Civ on PC or any other format where, unless you're willing to go online, or if right now you have Civ 5 and you play on Steam and you're part of a community, you play on your own. You play against the computer and you play your barbarians and you do what you want. The tech tree is very different, but you do it on your own. You don't have a city to manage. You have your own Civ to manage, which is very different. And so players come in the game and they don't expect to have to actually
work as a team.
Exactly. Coordinate with other players and actually communicate. That tutorial is a killer. You just look at this and you're like, oh, I just need Civ bucks to be able to win this game. That's basically what the tutorial is telling you.
Or that you need to play selfishly. And I think all of us, when we started playing, learned the hard way real quick that you don't get anywhere if you try to play selfishly. Either you go into a Civ and you start just building ministries and taking these promotions, and especially, and this is a long time ago, way back when it started, you got a promotion every time you won one of the auctions. People were jumping up and down in the Civ on a constant basis just because they decided to outbid on the auction, which, again, it's great for your personal game. It's great for the individual, for your personal fame level, but it wreaks havoc if you're actually trying to play as a team, because teams now want to coordinate. I would say most of the players that I know that have been around for a long time, they will say, okay, I'm not going to be online for that battle, so somebody else needs to be able to take DM so that they can run the battle, or I'm going to have these troops and I will field them X before I go to work. Is there anything else, or can I sell you my hammers before I go to work so that you have them for battle time? We coordinate like that. We're trying not to waste resources. We're trying to bring all of our resources together for the good of the Civ.
That's a difference from where the game is now from where it started.
Yeah.
All of these new players that are coming in aren't getting the opportunity to learn the same way we did, which was actually you could learn by learning how to thrive as an individual and beat larger teams, to where now you cannot play by yourself. You have to start with a team. You have to play with a team unless you drop into one of these games that are full of new players. In which case, when that happens, I leave those games because I don't want to destroy that game.
I find it's more enjoyable to play with lots of different players, and I would recommend that to any new player who's listening to this podcast, is try to play with as many different players as you can, because the strategies, the skill sets, the way different players play the game, you will be very surprised at how different certain groups of people will actually play the game, which is, I always find I learn something new in every single game, whether it's little or big. I'm always impressed that there's something new I can add to the repertoire of things that you can do with this game.
Same here.
And if Angel starts chatting to you, go immediately to the market to see what...
And if Angel's busy, I'll take over.
Yeah, that was just cruel.
Oh, the sad part is that I still can't caravan.
So Angel's been practicing.
I have, and there's sheets of paper all along my house. It's like a beautiful mind without the mind part.
My husband plays CivWorld, but is not a CivWorld player. I will ask him, who's on your server? I don't know. What era are you in? I don't know. How many people are in your Civ? Well, just me. It's like, okay, well, he gets online and he mazes and he goes to the next tech. That's all he does. He mazes and he does some puzzle swaps and doesn't know how to do 6x doubles or anything like that.
If I can draw this back to the whole cheating aspect, is there are a lot of people who want to play the game that way. They're not inferior. They're not lesser of people because they don't know every last Nazgul trick. They're also not lesser people because even if they know the last Nazgul trick, they don't want to do them. The parallel that I would use is in Civ 4. In order to win at the deity level of, you need to get everything timed right down to, this is how I am going to pop this great person on this turn. You have to micromanage to a level of detail that it ceases to be fun for many people. CivWorld has gotten to that same area, that there are a number of things that a lot of us do, and they're fun for us, but they make the game unfun for most players.
And I think the hard part for newer players is they don't realize how steep that learning curve actually is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a steep curve. When I thought I knew a lot about the game, and then I suddenly ran into Doug in a game, and then I got to spend a lot of time learning way more than I realized was going on in the game, you suddenly have your eyes open to just how steep the curve is. It can be pretty intimidating, actually, when you realize how much is really going on around you in a particular game.
And the learning curve never ends. I think all of us would agree that we learn something every time we play a game, every time we play with new players, every time we get into a new server. It's always different. And I go back to Douglas Adams here, expect the unexpected, because you never know what you're going to find on a server.
Saying that throwback is a superior way to play the game, that's a non-starter. Saying that something's a cheat and this isn't a cheat, it's a skill, and having that debate, that doesn't get anywhere. There are very few cheats that don't require skill, except for banking spam for 3 months. That just takes patience.
Persistence.
Lots of friends.
The one thing I would quickly say is I think cheat is the correct definition. I think it's more exploiting just problems with the way the game was programmed. There's, little loopholes. People have found those loopholes in the programming and they're exploiting them. To me, a cheat is I get to do something that you have absolutely no way of doing either, not because you don't know it, which is usually the case that we're talking about here. But to add to what Doug said, I would also say when we talk about the exploits and the cheats, we get into kind of the emotional part of the game, in that unlike a lot of other Facebook games that take a couple minutes to play and that's it, there is an emotional part of you've spent days or hours working at this particular game to have it snatched away from you in a moment of either you're not online or you can't do a particular thing.
Or everybody else in the game teams up against you. But I'm taking that personally.
There's definitely, a level of personal investment in the game where you spend that time. And I think that I agree with Rob, where they're not cheats, they're exploit. The problem I think we have is that not everybody knows how to do all the exploit, especially new players that will come in and join a game where you have experienced player exploiting the market, like all those commodities really high and get all the econs era up to 4 million, and then nobody else can do anything with that server. It's past them. They don't understand it. For those players doing that, there's obviously a level of interest. They're interested in doing those things. To them, it's part of the game, and they feel that it's been designed that way. And so they should be able to use it because the game is designed like this. Whether it was intentional or not, it is there. It's there to use, and they feel they should use it. Where you'll get the problem is that people get judgmental and feel, well, you don't need skill to do that. You don't invest your time like I do. You're not willing to put in the effort that other players who are a little more purist maybe and wish to get the game back as it was without all those exploits. It creates a divide, definitely. I don't think people are bad people because they use the exploit. I think that, again, the tolerance level has gone down so much that people just have no more patience. They want to be a purist or they want to use the exploits. There's nothing in the middle.
Well, but there's some. I mean, when you say people who are doing this aren't bad people, To some extent, there is ego. I don't want to give this up because this is what makes me better. And I am better because I win, so I have to win. And I will do anything to win. There is certainly some aspect of that that's going on with the refusing to give up exploits. The flip side of it is there is also a degree of the last game where they kept giving us a hard time about, yeah, you created a game for us to show us what it was like, but we're going to complain about the rules that we knew they were going to be in place before we started playing the game anyway.
We didn't ask you to come here. You came here on your own.
Exactly.
They asked
Right.
to join the game, knowing what the
ask
rules
them
were
to
gonna be.
come here.
When you can go to any other game and play by no rules, do whatever. But
Right.
in this case, they asked to play by the rules and then complained about the rules. And when that happens, there is something more at work than just, hey, the game's more fun this way. There is something at work going, I am losing this game, and the only reason that it can possibly be is because you've changed the rules. And that's completely unfair. And that's why the conversation is always it's about play balance.
It brings back into play really knowing the nuances of how the game works and the programming behind it, and not being able to kind of skip over those things by taking shortcuts, essentially.
Right. As one player, I can take all my team's hammers and multiply it by 5, and anything else that anybody else does is irrelevant. So everybody else has to also spend 24 hours cycling maps, and it's an escalation that all that's changed is we
got a lot less sleep.
Yes, we have a lot of people getting a lot less sleep, just mindlessly cycling map, and all we're saying is, hey, it's much more fun to go, okay, yeah, you can get a 500. I can only get 300. You're a better person. Now, let's all just agree to play by 100.
And I think that the people that have the worst time adjusting are the individuals. The people that are not necessarily part of a team or not willing to be a part of that community enough, or choose not to be a part of the community, to just know enough people to always have a team behind them. They're the ones, I think, that rely a lot on the exploit. You do have a couple of teams that rely heavily on them, people that play together on a regular basis. But I think most of the experienced players that depend on a team to be successful and to enjoy the game don't rely on the exploit so much. They rely on their teammates. The exploits are in the back of their mind, but it's not something they wish to use at all.
Well,
most of those experienced players. There's always going to be an exception.
The Nazgul, they were a different paradigm. They were to be the best, not because they wanted to lord it over everybody. And yeah, there was some ego involved there, but for the most part, they were really just about optimizing everything. That was the way the game was played back in the guild days, it was everybody was racing to optimize everything. And so finding an exploit in that world, everybody was doing it. That was the game. Who could find the most exploits?
Like the 80s in America.
Yeah, we don't really want to go back there, do we?
No, we don't. Every time a throwback is announced, I get really excited, and I kind of prep my family, and I make time and dates, and I tell my husband, okay, this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, I'm busy. Don't even ask to see me, and I actually have to make appointments like that, because otherwise I am required by my family to do things with them. But I let them know that, it's my free time. I don't get, very much of it, and this is what I want to do with it. And, they're just as guilty as I am. I mean, they love their computer games, and they love their movies, and whatever else it is that my family loves. I wouldn't know because I'm never there anymore. But I know they have free time and they use it however they like to use it, and I don't impose myself on them anymore. So can't they just stop imposing themselves on me? I'm sorry, that was terrible.
Well, I think to a certain extent it's true of all of us. Douglas, I've gotten up like at 5 to go to work, and he was still up from the night before, and you're like, whoa, that dude doesn't sleep.
Doug never
No
sleeps.
wonder I get nothing on the market. He is on again. Really? Does he have a clone? Wonder.
I just thought he had it like next to his side of the bed, and if he had it like set somehow, like if the market moved, it would bleep at him or something.
No, it's actually, people don't realize this, but Sid Meier has put one more turn into CivWorld. Most people don't realize it. You can see it with the 4-hour auctions. Okay, I got to wake up for that auction to win it. But what most people don't see is I've got 40 different commodities to play, and they're all moving in different cycles. So I've always got something moving that I need to just stay awake for 5 more minutes, and the price will adjust, and I'll get it. And so I'm frickin' one more turning this just like it was Civ 4, because there's always one more. I got to stay up for 5 more minutes so that I can buy that thing that I just sold half an hour ago.
Actually, Doug, that's the new thing I'm getting yelled at in the house is my sine wave curve number chart. They walk by and see my charts of paper with just numbers as I track different things.
When you start drawing them on the walls, you're in trouble.
Anytime I even approach the laptop, the 5-year-old walk by me and say, "Are you going to play that stupid game again?"
Oh, yes.
Hey, that's
my
an
husband.
upgrade.
My husband's officially a widower. That's how he gets it. He's like, "Oh, I guess you have a battle," and then he goes away.
Hey, at least you've trained him to that level. I have no hope over here.
He touched her game once. I think she nearly killed him. Didn't he touch your game, or was that?
Yes,
someone?
he helpfully upgraded her palace with CivBucks during a throwback game where we promised each other not to use CivBucks. And built a bridge to nowhere, too. So.
Yes. I had roads exploring my map that I didn't need exploring, and I came back after a day of work, and my castle was upgraded. I had spent 8 CivBucks, and I was like, I didn't do that. What happened? He's like, oh, I was just checking it out. Oh, my God. Play your own game.
Throwback as tutorial for new players.
Oh, he felt bad. He hasn't touched my game since then. So.
There's been a couple of games that were hosted and advertised, so there were a lot of older players on them, and there was one server where first the players were quoting Princess Bride back to each other, and then all of a sudden they quoted the entirety of Pulp Fiction on global chat. I mean, I don't think anybody was actually playing the game. And then there are other players who are known for their story time, which gets very entertaining and becomes, running jokes along all of the communities that Civ now inhabits, because I don't even know how many groups now that I have that are Civ related and or Civ spawned, because I'm now in a few groups that are full of Civ players or retired Civ players that have nothing to do with Civ anymore, but the only reason we're in these groups is because we know each other from Civ. Yeah. So
we've based an entire social network around the fact that we're intelligent enough to master this game or think we master it. It's like you've formed a new respect for people that probably you never would have even met any other way. It's nice. It's nice to find other intelligent beings on this planet. You're like, yay!
Record date 11/14/2012. Civilization World sound clips, copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright Civilized Communication at civcom.net.